Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is my friend Diane Sare, and we're going to talk about the arrest and arraignment of Donald Trump and how I believe, and I believe that Diane believes, that it's a diversion. What do you think?
Absolutely, it's a diversion. It's also meddling in the 2024 elections. And we saw the same thing with the former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, who you realize after they drove him out of office and made sure that he wouldn't run again or attempted to, he's never been charged. He's not convicted. In other words, there's no charges against him. So you have this pattern of the powers that be, namely certain moneyed interests, I would say, deciding that they're going to dictate, they can't allow the Americans to think for themselves. So they're going to tell you whom you're allowed to vote for and not. I think it's very bad. And I do think the timing is quite something because it occurred, one, after it became obvious to the world that President Biden himself and his cabinet, along with the UK and Norway and other European nations, blew up the Nord Stream pipelines. No one's been indicted for that. That's a major crime affecting the whole energy supply of Western Europe, $11 billion worth of infrastructure. Seymour Hersh presented a compelling case. And when the Russians asked, not even pointing fingers, they just said, could we get an investigation? The UN, only 3 nations, China, Russia, and Brazil, voted to even investigate the matter, which is really unbelievable when you think about it. So obviously, there's no concern for justice or truth or whether, and what Trump is accused supposedly of having done, which is, I don't know what paying hush money to a prostitute that might have been a campaign to, it's absurd. It's all completely absurd. We have serious matters to be discussing. The other thing that I think it's a cover up for is the blowout of the banking system, which is not done. And you've heard the expression whistling by the graveyard. You notice we bailed out these banks, right? Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, I guess got bought by I forget the name, Flagstar or something or other. Anyway, so they put a temporary Band-Aid, but everyone in finance knows that this is just the tip of the iceberg. This whole banking system has to come down. LaRouche warned about that years ago. The removal of the Glass-Steagall protection of normal commercial banks is largely responsible for the fact that people could risk losing their savings. And that's not over. That is not over. This thing absolutely is going to come crashing down. And what we need is a preemptive kind of a bankruptcy reorganization. So you decide before the crash what you want to protect and what you're going to let go. None of that's being done. Instead, we have this hysteria mongering, all focusing on absurd charges against a person who is running for president of the United States. So I think it's terrible, and I think it's designed to make people stupid.
People watch this. I once called a friend of mine during one of the MSNBC shows, and she texted me back. She said, call me after Nicole's show is over. And it's like these people are glued to the TV. They're listening to all this minutia, and they're not looking at the big picture. They can't, or they don't want to understand what's going on in the Ukraine, that and the fact that Finland just joined NATO, that's pretty frightening. And
absolutely,
and everything is, Trump paid this person off or did this or did that. And it's like, we as a society better wake up soon to reality. But the mainstream media is not allowing us to do that. What do you think?
No, it's terrible. And you're right. The situation with regard to Ukraine and Russia is only escalating. The Finland joining NATO is part of that. Also, a few weeks ago, the British announced that they're going to be shipping depleted uranium ammunition with the tanks that they're sending to Ukraine. And they've had plenty of time to do studies. I mean, you want to talk about war crimes. The United States used tons of depleted uranium in Iraq, and the incidences of cancer increased 400-fold.
Yep.
From 40, I forget what, 40 cases per 100,000 to 1,600 cases per 100,000. So this is really a crime against humanity. And as the Russians said, who is this going to hurt? Well, they're using the depleted uranium in the territory of Ukraine, or what they consider Ukraine. So as the Russians said, the British are hurting their client state, actually, by supplying them with this, not to mention anyone who's going to be a target of it. It's very cynical. It is very dangerous. Unfortunately, we have a lot of younger people in American policy-making positions who apparently never studied history or geography, who don't know about Napoleon's attempt to take over Russia, or Adolf Hitler's Operation Barbarossa in the Soviet Union. And there are reasons which Putin stated very clearly. Remember, at the beginning of the special military operation, he actually had public meetings with the Duma, public statements of National Security Council meetings translated into English, because he wanted the West to know what he was thinking. So he's not doing things secretly or under the table. He's been very, very clear. And our leaders are so arrogant that look at what's happened with Saudi Arabia and Iran. China has brokered this incredible agreement. Now the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia and Iran are going to Beijing very soon. The world is moving out of the dollar, and the Saudis are not even under the control of the US anymore. They're cutting production and raising the petroleum prices when Biden's trying to get them to do the opposite. So all of these, the indictment and arrest of Donald Trump, it's a very excellently timed operation to get people off of what is actually happening.
What astounds me is the people on the TV who adhere to this philosophy. They're on TV day after day. Trump did this, Trump did that. And it's like, these people have got to know better. And I believe they have got to know better. Would you agree?
On one point, I would have said yes. Now I'm not so sure. I am increasingly astounded by the ignorance of people. Not that they're stupid, but the way they've come to think. And it's been really decades of brainwashing. Some years ago, actually 10 years ago, I spoke to a university class, to a university in New Jersey, which is a school that happens to specialize in criminal justice and law. So I asked the class, I said, how many of you think it's legal for one nation to invade another nation to overthrow their head of state? And about 2/3 of the class thought there was no problem with that.
Wow.
It's just become, people consider this now normal because they see the United States doing it. I will also say the effect of what they're doing is they're making Trump into an incredible folk hero. I mean, all of us, I had listened to his speech after the arraignment, and all you can say is, yes, good. I'm glad you're fighting. I'm glad you're standing up to this. And Trump, unlike Biden, does reference the fact that we could be on the brink of nuclear war. So he seems to be a bit more in reality. And you're going to have Americans asking, well, is this what they're trying to cover up? So they are turning Trump into a complete hero. And I know some Democrats are a little bit aware of that and therefore having second thoughts about this whole thing. But the American people are so fed up with our so-called justice system. So many Americans have been targeted for stupid little things, and they're seeing monstrous crimes being committed where no one is held accountable.
My thought is, if you put on the TV and, you have these so-called pundits, that it's Trump 24/7, and in the event of a nuclear war, they're going to be vaporized just like you and I will be. Don't they get that?
No,
How
it doesn't
could,
even occur to them.
do they think they're going to live in a bomb shelter for the rest of time, or
No, I think they live in the mysterious bubble world. You know the expression, they would never let that happen, where no one ever tells you who the they is, that they would never have a nuclear war. They are totally delusional. And I will say, Cynthia, we haven't talked about it a lot, but I think it is a huge problem that so many Americans are on drugs. And they're on all different ones, illegal and legal. The marijuana question is just exploding, and it does impair people's judgment. It does. People may have a sense of well-being, although I think smoking pot actually increases anxiety, although people say it makes you relax. It certainly causes paranoia in certain people, but it all allows you to just migrate inward, not have to consider reality, live in your own little world. And it's a world that doesn't conform to reality either, which is what makes it so dangerous, because you can be marching off the edge of a cliff and believe that you can fly. And that's where I think a lot of our Congress is right now.
over the last couple of days, as I watched this unfold, I came up with a scenario, and I want to see if you agree with this. All of a sudden, Trump's being arrested for paying 130,000 for hush money or whatever the deal is. And it's like right before the start of the 2024 presidential election. Because of the fact that Donald Trump is a showman, do you think that this could be all an act and Trump is in on it and he's, benefiting this financially? He's allowing this to happen because he's under the impression that bad press is better than no press at all. What do you think?
I think it's an amusing theory, but I don't think so. I don't think he and his family really appreciate this kind of publicity. His life would be a lot better if you weren't always fighting off the FBI and the news media. So I don't think he's in on it, but there's no question that he is benefiting from it. And that's like everything this administration does in their extreme arrogance, isn't it? We put the sanctions on Russia, and then we say, and we're going to isolate Russia. Okay, well, Russia's so isolated that 4/5 of the entire planet is now working with Russia. And we're isolated, and our economy is collapsing. Their cities are beautiful and clean. They don't have homeless people all over the streets. They don't have people smoking pot on every corner. China, forget it. If you're pushing drugs, you get executed. That's sort of left over from the opium wars, because they saw that as a weapon, right? The British used it as a weapon very blatantly to destroy the ability of people to think, to get them addicted so that you can take over the country. So this, I think Americans have to really take a step back and consider, how can it be that in a nation of 330 million people, we are given what appears to be a choice of presidential candidates of people who range from mediocre to downright criminal to geriatric, belonging in a place where they protect people with dementia. How could that be? Why have we tolerated this? And we see it in the elections, as you know, what happened in my race against Senator Chuck Schumer. What I had to do to get my name on the ballot, and then even after that, the exclusion from the debate. So Americans are being deprived of choices. They're not even aware of what's going on before they get to the ballot box. And I think we have a lot of work to do, but I think people have a sense there's something very wrong. They're not really sure what to do about it.
They don't know, because I don't know if the political leaders know what to do, or that they're just grasping onto the power, and they're afraid they're going to lose it, right?
Yes, and I just returned from something called the Independent National Convention, Independence United. It was a big convention for people who have left the major parties. Tulsi Gabbard was there, Dennis Kucinich was there, Chris Hedges, Brock Pierce, who's the billionaire crypto guy who ran for president in 2020. It was you could call it an eclectic combination of individuals. But what was the theme is we have to pull ourselves together. Apparently now what they reported is over 50% of Americans are registered independents. People don't want to be registered with the parties anymore. Doesn't mean they don't vote for the parties, but they have left. They don't want a formal affiliation with the parties anymore, the majority of the American people. So then the question is, how do you break out of the containment? And one of the things that we were discussing there is perhaps all these independent parties, even though we do have some significant disagreements, like we saw between the Libertarian and the People's Party, but they pulled together the Rage Against the War Machine rally, that there are certain matters of life and death, like whether we have a nuclear war, whether we have a total blowout of the banking system, whether there's adequate food or clean drinking water, whether our bridges are collapsing. There are certain matters on which we can be unified, and perhaps we should pull ourselves together and not allow the duopoly of the Democratic and Republican parties to divide and conquer, but pull this disparate majority together on some certain key matters or key races and really wage a fight to change things.
There are people stepping up to run for president, and on the Republican side, they were saying, "Oh, Chris Christie," and there was another gentleman, I forgot who it was, who tossed their hat into the ring, and they said, "Well, between them, they won't get a 0.5%." Well, they're not talking about what these people are espousing, what issues are important. They're just saying, "Oh, they don't have the percentage of support to win," and it's a given from the news media that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee, and they like this because they're making money from this. The ratings are higher. Somebody like Michael Cohen will write another book. He'll get more money. And the bottom line is money. It's not about the security of the world. It's about the ratings and the money and the power that these organizations are able to garner, right?
Yeah, and then on a certain level, not the lower level even of the candidates, but I have to say the British Empire, and by that I don't mean the UK, but I mean these financial elites, they never forgave the American Revolution. They've been waiting to destroy the idea of the principle of self-government. And everything's been thrown at us, particularly the shift in the 60s away from the industrial productive economy to this so-called rock, drug, sex counterculture or the consumer economy. Think about the difference of mindset between a producer and a consumer. Think about people that people I know, usually older, who built major highways or built a dam or worked on a nuclear power plant. They have a certain sense of pride. FDR talked about the dignity of labor. They can show their grandchildren, I made this. A farmer can say, I produced this.
Right.
What is the identity of a consumer? I sit here and you feed me. I
Right.
sit here and you serve me. I think you get brain rot. I think it's a terrible thing. And we've nearly lost our republic. We have no sense of a national mission or purpose. Most Americans don't believe it should be our mission to run around overthrowing governments, and we call it spreading democracy, but we're spreading dictatorship and misery. But what is our mission? What's our mission for the good? Why have various of our leaders talked about a city on a hill? Well, then you would think that means we should have a very high standard of living, very high standard of literacy, a very high level of classical culture, that people would say, when our nation is, we know that the Americans are going to be the first ones there when there's a hurricane, an earthquake, a tornado. They're going to have the most advanced equipment. They're going to be skilled at dealing with this. In other words, an image of the good, of breakthrough, of joining hands with other cultures who are making breakthroughs and advancing it further. That should be the mission of our republic. And we've completely lost that and become, frankly, almost exactly that which we fought the American Revolution against.
I'm astounded that even in New York State, when you garnered the 66,000 names to get the petition to get on the ballot, there was somebody on a third party who kind of poo-pooed you and kind of thought that you were, you cheated a little bit. And it's like, rather than the third parties or people outside this clique band together and find commonality, they don't. They fight with each other. That's no recipe for success. Would you agree?
I completely agree. And that's what I found somewhat refreshing about this conference I just attended, because people seem to be committed to doing other than that. And, we just saw this in the Congress with this bill introduced by Matt Gaetz of Florida to get our troops out of Syria, because he first had a bill to withdraw our troops and that it would take effect within 15 days of passage. Then his staff, or he, realized that he could actually get Democrat co-sponsors if he changed it to 180 days. Maybe they didn't want to have a repeat of the disaster of getting out of Afghanistan. So he introduced a bill to enforce the War Powers Act, that we cannot have troops somewhere if the Congress hasn't declared war. And lo and behold, 56 Democrats, the whole Progressive Caucus, got behind the bill of Matt Gaetz, a Trump Republican from Florida. And they ended up with 103 votes. Now, that wasn't enough to win, but that is a heck of a lot more than what I've seen. How many people have had the guts to vote against sending money to Ukraine? 3?
Right.
5, right? So this is different. And I think they're very afraid of that. And that's probably also why they want to do this crazy thing with making Trump the focus of everything, because there's sort of a movement of resistance coming together where people are saying, you know what, we thought we had all these disagreements, but maybe we actually don't. Maybe it's in our interest, everyone, to not be in a state of perpetual war with countries that most Americans couldn't even find on a map.
I saw yesterday, today is the 6th of April. So yesterday on the news, I saw where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is considering running for president. He's an outsider. What's your feeling?
Well, I can only encourage that. I think we are not suffering from too many qualified candidates. I don't know him well. I am well aware of his work against vaccines. I have not read his book. I haven't heard him say a lot on foreign policy. He just put out a very thoughtful tweet either this morning or last night, recognizing that the US has completely destroyed our friendships with other nations all over the world. I appreciate that. So I think it could only be to the good if he steps into the race. I think we need that kind of debate from thoughtful people who are willing to say things that are not approved by the mainstream media.
Have you followed Marianne Williams at all?
A bit. I'm familiar. You know, I know she's anti-war and so on. I'm not really sure what her intention or purpose is. So I can't say more on that. I mean, you know, I don't think people who don't have any idea what's involved should run for public office. I think people should be serious about the effort and intend to serve, but anyone who is willing to make the sacrifices that are required to do that, who cares about the future of our republic, who cares about the future of mankind, they absolutely should step in, and we should give the voters more of an opportunity to make their voices heard by having many debates that are public and publicized, answering questions from people. Why do I and my friends have to get up with, in my case, bringing a bullhorn to a breakfast meeting with Chuck Schumer? Because Schumer won't meet with me. He won't respond to letters. He refused to debate me. So then your only way of having communication with this person who allegedly is supposed to be representing you is to bring a bullhorn into a fancy breakfast to start a conversation. It really shouldn't be like that.
So what do you envision over the next year?
Well, I hope we have a year. I think we are so near the end that people really have to wake up. And in fact, there are two major events coming up in which I'm participating. One is April 15th and 16th. The Schiller Institute is holding an international conference, actually, where they're hoping to put together, and Scott is going to be on the morning panel, which will feature a lot of military people because the nuclear war danger is so grave. The afternoon discussion is combining this American movement of people putting aside their party differences with the movement in what they call now the global South. It's not really the global South, it's the global majority, right? Saudi Arabia and Argentina want to join the BRICS, as does, I think, Egypt and Libya. And I mean, there is a huge movement of nations coming together to establish a new order on the planet, which is more just and more respectful of sovereignty. And then April 22nd, I'm doing my own town hall meeting in Manhattan on similarly these topics, but we have to have a movement that changes the direction of the United States. You know, the whole world is looking at us. They think we're responsible for our government.
Well, aren't we?
Exactly. We are.
But, you know, what you say and possibly what Robert F. Kennedy says and Scott Ritter, who's not a candidate, they're ignored. They're ignored by the mainstream media. So,
Well, not exactly ignored. They're attacked and vilified. They're
right,
well aware. They're well aware. So, I'm definitely coming to the conclusion that what Roger Stone said, that there is no such thing as bad press, probably is an accurate thought.
so as the election evolves, I'd like to have you back on Issues That Matter. How's your new campaign going?
It's going. I can say there really hasn't been much let up. There was a great deal of momentum toward the end that has continued. Various of my contacts in the press have continued to interview me, and I think this one has a lot of potential, actually.
Great. So you've been listening to Diane Sare, who's running for Senate in 2024 against Kirsten Gillibrand. And I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. If you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for listening and watching. And Diane, we'll talk again. Thank you for being on. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day, everybody.
You too.